when our homeowner association president stunned my mom over a navy blue mailbox. She had no idea she just assaulted Cumberland County's top prosecutor who's taken down crime lords and killers for 15 years. What happens when the most feared legal mind in the state decides your dishonest homeowners association is her next big case? I jumped when our doorbell rang at 7 o'clock a.m. on Saturday. Who visits this early? I peeked through the window to see Cynthia Reynolds, our homeowner association president, tapping her foot restlessly on our welcome mat. Her bright red fingernails matched her lipstick as she clutched a piece of paper. Mom was still in her pajamas, sipping coffee. When she opened the door, I hung back in the hallway watching Catherine. "This is a penalty notice," Cynthia announced. Without saying hello, she shoved the paper into Mom's hand. "Your mailbox color is not approved. The charge is $47, due by next Friday." Mom glanced at our newly painted navy blue mailbox by the curb. "What exactly is wrong with it?" "It violates Homeowner Association Code 39(2)(b). All external fixtures must use approved colors." Cynthia's voice had that phony sweetness adults use when they're being mean, but pretending not to be. "I checked the guidelines before painting," Mom replied firmly. "There's no list of forbidden colors." Cynthia's smile vanished. "The board knows unapproved colors when we see them." "Navy isn't on our approved list." "May I see this list?" Mom asked. "It's in our internal documents. Pay the fine or repaint it white by Friday." Cynthia turned and marched away, her heels clicking on our walkway. Mom closed the door looking at the notice. "This is nonsense," she muttered. As Cumberland County's top prosecutor for 15 years, she handled criminals and gang leaders, not silly arguments about mailbox colors. I helped Mom make pancakes while she told me stories about the courthouse. "In my job, Jamie, proof matters. Facts matter, not just because someone important says so." Just then, cars started arriving. Next door, Mrs. Winters was hosting another loud garden party, her third this month. Her guests parked, blocking half our driveway, and soon music blasted so loud our windows shook. "Should we call someone?" I asked. "They're breaking noise rules and those cars are blocking us in." Mom sighed. "Let's record it first." She took photos of the cars and used her phone to measure the noise level with an app. 78 dB, way over the 65 allowed by homeowner association rules. Through our kitchen window, I spotted Cynthia arriving at the party. She hugged Mrs. Winters, accepted a drink, and then both women looked toward our house, laughing. My stomach felt uneasy seeing that mom look, I whispered. She watched for a minute. "Interesting. Biased enforcement might be happening here." That afternoon, she wrote a polite email requesting the architectural guidelines that mention mailbox colors always start with, "assuming it's just a mistake," she told me. Never jump to thinking people are being deliberately unfair. Monday passed with no response. Tuesday, too. On Wednesday, another notice appeared on our door, now a $120 fine for failure to follow promptly with violation notice. Mom called the homeowner association office 4 times. Each time they transferred her to voicemail. On her 5th call, someone finally answered. "Homeowner association office. How can I help you?" a dull voice said. "This is Catherine Morgan at 1872 Pinewood Drive. I'm calling about 2 penalties I've received regarding my mailbox, and I'm requesting a copy of the color guidelines. That information is only available at board meetings." The voice replied, "When is the next meeting?" It was yesterday. "The next one is in 2 months. Mom's legal face appeared, the calm, focused look I knew meant trouble for someone not angry, just determined. "I'll need to speak with Cynthia directly, then. She's very occupied this week." The call suddenly ended. That evening, Mrs. Winters' teenage son threw a football that knocked over our garden gnome, breaking it. When Mom went over to discuss it politely, Mrs. Winters claimed she didn't see anything happen, and shut the door in Mom's face. As Mom swept up the broken pieces, a shiny black SUV parked in front of our house. Cynthia stepped out with 2 men in polo shirts with homeowner association board member stitched on them. "Catherine," Cynthia called, "out walking onto our property without asking. These fines need immediate attention. We're here to collect payment." I've been trying to reach you for days. Mom replied. I need to see the section that prohibits navy blue. Exactly. The taller man stepped forward. The board has authority to determine aesthetic violations. Pay now, or we'll place a lien on your property. Mom stood straight, suddenly looking like she did in the courtroom. Are you an attorney, sir? Because placing a lien requires specific legal procedures, not just intimidation on someone's front lawn. The man's face reddened. Cynthia, cut in. We know the law, Catherine. You have 3 days to pay both fines plus a $25 late fee. Otherwise, things will become very difficult for you. As they walked away, I whispered, Mom, don't these seem like intimidators? She watched them go, her expression thoughtful. Yes, but oppressors usually pick on people they think won't fight back. She pulled out her phone, took pictures of our mailbox from multiple angles, and then called her assistant at the prosecutor's office. Derek, I need a favor. Can you pull property records for Pinecrest Gardens Homeowner Association? Also, any complaints filed against them in the last 5 years. Thanks. She turned to me with a little smile. Let's see if other neighbors have had similar problems. Knowledge is strength, Jamie. That night, I heard Mom on the phone with Judge Wilson, her old law school friend. She rarely brought work home, but something about her voice told me this mailbox thing was becoming much more than a simple fine. I fell asleep wondering what would happen in 3 days when the payment was due. Little did I know, quiet life in Pinecrest Gardens was about to erupt. What mystery was Cynthia hiding that made her so eager to control every detail of our neighborhood? Friday morning, I woke up to a weird clicking sound outside my window. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Cynthia Reynolds walking around our yard with a camera taking pictures of everything. Our flower beds, the porch, even the gap between our garbage cans. When she aimed her camera up at my window, I ducked down, heart racing. Mom, called out, Cynthia is taking pictures of our house. Mom was already dressed for work. In her charcoal gray suit, her sending people to jail outfit, she strode outside, and I followed, staying behind her like she was my barrier. Cynthia, what are you doing on my property? Mom asked, her voice super calm, but somehow scary too. Cynthia jumped, almost dropping her pricey camera documenting violations. Catherine, it's my responsibility as homeowner association president. What violations, exactly? Mom folded her arms. Cynthia checked her clipboard. Your lawn is 0, 3 and 2. Hi, your garbage cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes yesterday. The garden hose isn't properly stored, and that mailbox remains unapproved. She sounded like she was reading from a list she'd memorized. How exactly did you measure my grass? Mom asked. Cynthia pulled out a special tool from her purse. Exact lawn height gauge. Standard homeowner association equipment. Mom held out her hand. May I see the homeowner association bylaws section about grass height? Cynthia's smile stiffened. The board has authority to interpret aesthetic standards. Pay the accumulated fines by 5 o'clock p.m. today or face penalties. She spun around and marched away, her clipboard clutched to her chest. At breakfast, Mom's phone kept buzzing with messages from her office. She was supposed to be preparing for a big trial, but instead, she was digging through a stack of homeowner association documents we'd found in our move-in papers. Jamie, look at this, she said, pointing to a page. The homeowner association guidelines say nothing about mailbox colors except that they must be maintained in good condition. Which ours definitely is. Mom spent her lunch break at the county records office. When she came home that evening, her eyes had that excited look they got when she cracked a tough case. Something suspicious is happening in Pinecrest Gardens. She told me, spreading papers across our kitchen table. 3 families on our street left suddenly last year. The Washingtons, the Patels, and the Garkas all sold their homes for way below market value after receiving multiple homeowner association violations. She pointed to property records, and guess who bought those houses through different company names that all link back to the same owner? Reynolds Property Holdings. As in Cynthia Reynolds? That's so raw, I said, understanding why Mom looked so determined. Instead of paying these false fines, Mom said, "I'm sending a formal letter requesting a hearing, as is my right under state law." She worked on the letter all evening, citing laws that sounded like secret codes. Pursuant to Civil Code Section 5855 in violation of due process requirements under Davis-Sterling. As Mom sealed the envelope, she said, "Always fight oppressors with knowledge, Jamie. They expect fear, but we'll give them truth." After dinner, I was washing dishes when our water suddenly stopped. The faucet sputtered and went dry. "Mom, the water's not working." We went outside with flashlights to check the main valve near the sidewalk. The metal cover was loose, and Mom carefully lifted it. "Someone's messed with this," she said, pointing to fresh scratch marks around the valve that was firmly in the off position. She turned it back on, and we heard water flow again through our pipes. As we stood up, headlights swept across us. Mrs. Winters drove by slowly, phone to her ear, watching us. The next morning, Mom found a deep gash along the side of her car. That afternoon, our garbage wasn't collected, though everyone else's was. On Monday, my principal called me to the office to ask about reports of yelling from our house, which never happened. Each time something occurred, Mom documented it carefully, taking pictures, writing down times and dates, and saving every piece of mail we received. On Wednesday, we received a legal letter stating we now owed $2,300 in accumulated fines, penalties, and administrative fees. It also mentioned an emergency home owner association board meeting that Friday where they would vote on placing a lien on our home. Mom called the prosecutor's office and took a rare day off. She spread all her evidence across the dining table: photos, bylaws, property records, and printouts of laws. "I couldn't understand, Jamie," she said while highlighting sections of paper. "I think they're targeting houses they want to resell for profit." The three families who left all had small issues that exploded into huge fines. "Like our mailbox?" I asked. "Exactly. But they picked the wrong house." This? Mom reached for her phone and called her friend Sarah, who worked at the local newspaper. "Hey, it's Catherine. Remember that story you wanted about community misconduct? I might have something better than what we discussed that night." Someone left a dead bird on our porch. When Mom found it in the morning, she didn't look scared. She looked determined. She called the police non-emergency line and reported it as intimidation. Later, I overheard her on the phone. "Derek, I need every file we have on threatening tactics used by organized groups. Yes, like gangs, but also business operations. And get me everything on racketeer applications to non-criminal enterprises." At dinner, Mom told me she was going to the Emergency Homeowner Association meeting tomorrow night. "This ends now," she said, her prosecutor face fully on. "I want to come too," I insisted. "I've seen everything that's happened." After thinking for a minute, she nodded. "Okay, but stay close to me." As we finished eating, 3 more homeowner association violation notices were shoved under our door, one claiming our porch light was too bright, another saying our welcome mat was non-standard, and a third about the unapproved occupancy of our garden gnome replacement. Mom just laughed, which wasn't the reaction I expected. "They're getting nervous," she said. "They know I'm not backing down." That night, I couldn't sleep thinking about the meeting. What would happen when Mom confronted Cynthia with all her evidence? And why was our little navy blue mailbox worth all this trouble? I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, our quiet neighborhood conflict would turn into something that would make the evening news across the entire state. Would Mom's years of putting away dangerous criminals prepare her for what Cynthia was willing to do to protect her illegal real estate scheme? I felt my heart pounding as we walked into the packed community center. Cynthia sat at the front table like a queen on her seat of power, whispering and laughing with Mrs. Winters while pointing at us. The room went silent when we entered. 50 neighbors suddenly very interested in their shoes. "You shouldn't have come," whispered Mr. Rodriguez, our kind neighbor from across the street. "Cynthia's been bragging all day about how she's going to make an example of your family." Mom squeezed my hand. "That's exactly why we're here." When Mom signed up to speak, Cynthia rolled her eyes. The sign-up sheet mysteriously vanished right after 6 people spoke about garden Gnome regulations and pool hours before Cynthia tried to end the meeting. We still have speakers on the list, called out an older man in the back. Catherine Morgan hasn't had her turn. Mom walked confidently to the microphone. She looked different. Tonight, not just my mom, but Prosecutor Morgan, the woman criminals feared. My name is Catherine Morgan. I've lived in Pinecrest Gardens for 8 years, and I'm here to address the false fines against my property and the pattern of harassment my family has experienced. Cynthia's face turned crimson. This isn't on the agenda. According to Homeowner Association Bylaw Section 4(3), residents may address grievances during open comments. Mom replied, holding up the rulebook. I've recorded 17 instances of biased enforcement, including. Cynthia slammed her hand on the table. Your 3 minutes are up. I just started speaking, Mom said. Calmly. Actually, she's only spoken for 20 seconds, said the elderly man, holding up his phone timer. Cynthia stood up, her voice shaking. You're interrupting this meeting with groundless accusations. I'm calling security. 2 large men wearing black polo shirts with Homeowner Association enforcement badge emerged from a side door. One had a flashlight, the other a belt with pepper spray, handcuffs, and something I couldn't quite see. Miss Morgan, you need to leave now, said the bigger man, grabbing Mom's arm roughly. Take your hands off me, Mom said, her voice steady but firm. I have the legal right to speak at this meeting. The room was so quiet, I could hear the air conditioning humming. Phones came out as neighbors started recording. She's becoming aggressive, Cynthia announced. Loudly remove her immediately. I am not aggressive, Mom replied. I am exercising my rights as a homeowner too. It happened so fast. The second guard pulled something from his belt, a small black device with 2 metal prongs. There was a buzzing sound, like electricity, and suddenly Mom's body went stiff. The taser wires connected to her chest, and she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking violently. I screamed and ran to her. Stop it. Stop hurting her. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. G-man from 2 doors down shouted, call 911. 3 neighbors rushed forward to help Mom. Cynthia stood at her table completely unshaken. Our security team is authorized to use reasonable force when homeowners become threatening. She was just talking, I shouted through tears, holding Mom's hand as she struggled to breathe. Her eyes were wide with shock and pain. The security guard who tasered her grinned. Should have paid your fines, lady. Mr. Rodriguez pushed through the crowd. Are you crazy? You can't taser someone for speaking at a meeting. She was hostile, Cynthia insisted, as shocked neighbors began yelling. I felt unsafe. I watched Mom's face change as she caught her breath. Her eyes narrowed, and I recognized that look. The same one she got before walking into court to face the worst criminals in Cumberland County. Phone, she whispered to me, her voice shaky but determined. Back pocket. Call Judge Wilson, then Detective Ramirez. Who exactly did you just attack? Mrs. Gomez asked Cynthia loudly. Do you even know who she is? Cynthia waved her hand carelessly. Just another entitled homeowner who thinks rules don't apply to her. That's Cumberland County Chief Prosecutor Catherine Morgan, Mr. Rodriguez announced, the woman who took down the West Side Gang and sent 3 dishonest politicians to prison last year. The security guards exchanged nervous glances. One of them whispered something to Cynthia, whose smug smile faded instantly. Sirens wailed in the distance as paramedics rushed in to check on Mom. I heard her whisper something that sent shivers down my spine. I've been looking for my next big case. Looks like I just found it. Blue and red police lights flashed across our street as news vans parked everywhere. 6 reporters shoved microphones in my face while I tried to get to the hospital. Is it true your mom was tasered over a mailbox? One shouted. Does your mom plan to sue the homeowner association? Yelled another. Mom spent the night in the hospital with heart tests to make sure the taser hadn't caused injury. By morning, her office had sent 2 investigators to our house. They carried out boxes of proof we'd collected over months. Photos, emails, the fake violation notices. You recorded the whole thing? Detective Ramirez asked, watching the video I'd taken on my phone. Mom told me to always document everything, I replied. The detective's eyes widened when she saw Mom collapse from the taser. "This isn't just assault," she muttered. "This is negligent endangerment." Judge Wilson personally signed the search warrants. 3 police cars surrounded the homeowner association office by noon. Officers carried out computers and filing cabinets while neighbors watched from their driveways. When Mom came home that afternoon wearing her court suit, despite the doctor's advice to rest, 7 patrol cars escorted her. Neighbors lined the streets, cheering as she walked slowly to our front door. "Are you really going after them?" I asked, helping her to the couch. "They've been hurting people for years," she replied, wincing as she sat down. "Someone had to stop them." The doorbell rang non-stop. Neighbors bringing casseroles, flowers and stories. Mrs. Gonzalez cried as she described how Cynthia had penalized her $3,000 for planting unauthorized roses. 3 days after Mrs. Gonzalez rejected Cynthia's cheap offer to buy her house, Mr. Patel showed us letters threatening to put a lien on his home over hidden from the street holiday decorations. 2 weeks later, his dream house sold for 30% below market value to a company called Pinecrest Investments. Mom listened carefully, taking notes. Despite her shaking hands when Judge Wilson arrived with the district attorney, they spread documents across our dining table. "It's bigger than we thought," the D.A. whispered. "Cynthia's brother-in-law works at the bank approving these mortgages. The security company isn't registered anywhere." 3 days later, Mom stood at our driveway for a press conference, still bruised but standing tall. Today, the Cumberland County Prosecutor's Office has filed 37 charges against 5 members of the Pinecrest Gardens Homeowners Association Board, she announced as cameras flashed. These charges include criminal collusion, fraud, falsifying records, assault, practicing law without a license, and multiple constitutional violations. News helicopters circled overhead as police cars pulled up to Cynthia's house. The cameras caught everything: Cynthia being let out in handcuffs, screaming about her rights, while Mom watched calmly from across the street. The investigation has uncovered what appears to be an organized scheme targeting specific homeowners. Mom continued. Board members created fake violations and excessive fines to force residents to sell their homes at low prices, then purchase these properties through dummy companies for substantial profits. Financial records revealed the shocking truth. Cynthia and 3 board members had created a property flipping company that made over $3 million buying and selling homes in our neighborhood. They'd driven out 14 families through intimidation and ridiculous fines. Mrs. Winters wasn't just a rowdy neighbor. She got paid $500 for every homeowner she helped target by hosting loud parties and creating disturbances next to homes they wanted to buy. The most shocking revelation came when police identified the security guard who tasered Mom. He was Cynthia's nephew with a criminal record, who'd been released from prison just 6 months earlier for violent assault. He wasn't licensed to carry a taser, Detective Ramirez told us, and we found evidence they've used that taser on at least 4 other homeowners who questioned their authority. 2 weeks later, Judge froze all homeowner association accounts and suspended the board pending investigation. The court appointed a supervisor to manage neighborhood affairs. Mom still had bandages from the taser probes when she walked into court to face Cynthia at the preliminary hearing. "You think you've won," Cynthia muttered as officers led her past our seats. "This isn't over." Mom just smiled. "Actually, it was over the moment you decided that rules only apply to other people." Neighbors gathered at our house to rejoice when the judge ordered the homeowner association dismantled and restructured under court supervision. The first act of the newly elected board approving any mailbox color residents wanted. 6 months later, I helped Mom hang a plaque in her office. A small blue mailbox frame containing the taser barbs the hospital had removed from her chest. "Why keep something so awful?" I asked. Mom touched the frame gently. "To remember that standing up against oppressors is always worth it, even when it hurts outside our window." A dozen neighbors were painting their mailboxes in navy blue, not because they had to, but because they wanted to.